Who needs Hollywood? I hear they're really nuts out there. Give me a town like old New York, with lots of trees and clean, fresh air.
You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to some of our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Stir Crazy. Watching it with me is Carla Francis, who can be found on the Theme Park Films podcast. Hi Carla, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Brilliant. And this was the film that you wanted to talk about. What was so special about it for you?
Well, I had to pick an 80s film that I was fairly certain we wouldn't be covering at any point on our show, because I tried to cram in as many 80s films, being an 80s child, as I can, giving them some kind of theme park connection very, very loosely. But I didn't think there would ever, sadly, be a Stir Crazy theme park ride. So it seemed like the obvious choice. It's a film I want to talk about. And it's one that I know I can never cover on my own show. So, yeah, that's why I picked it.
You don't count Mechanical Bulls as a theme park ride?
Oh, you see, now you're making me doubt this choice. Maybe I could have shoehorned it in at some point.
See, this is one of those films that before I saw it, I always assumed it was the two of them going to prison and pretending to be mad, the whole Stir Crazy, and the poster of them being dressed as woodpeckers. It made it look as though they'd gone to some kind of excuse to get out of prison by being mad. Of course, it being Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, there is a lot of crazy behaviour in there. Mm-hmm. Some of it borders on perhaps mental illness. But, I mean, these are one of the most famous double acts of the era. They were in 4 films together. This was the second. And it was also the third highest grossing film of 1980, which, when you put it up against the two that beat it, so we're talking 9 to 5 and The Empire Strikes Back, the small independent film, it's one of the, it really did well. Bear in mind, it did have a stellar cast, or certainly the two leads. But watching it again, it kind of stands the test of time, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't realise it was that big at the time of it coming out. I mean, obviously I saw it. I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but this was a film I used to watch all the time as a kid. And when you actually watch it back, you realise that's wildly inappropriate. This isn't a child's film at all. However, I think I saw it obviously from a TV version, because there was all of the swearing was bleeped out. I remember the whole thing was bleeped. And I don't remember any of the strip club scenes being included in it. So it's a very, very watered down version. But yeah, from the age of sort of 5 or 6, I remember just watching this on a loop. And I don't think I had a clue really what was going on. But I guess because a lot of their behaviour was quite slapstick, it just used to really make me laugh.
It's quite a common theme, certainly among some of the previous episodes I've done, where, you know, we'll talk about films and most of the guests are, you know, very much of a similar age. You know, they were 80s kids watching films that, looking back, are wildly inappropriate. You know, I reminisced about the time that I was about 8 or 9 and my dad rented me and my brother Predator. and even looking back at this, and the first time we meet Richard Pryor's character, Harry, he's working at what looks, you know, he's in catering, looking at a very nice upper class dinner party, working as a butler or a waiter. And yet it turns out that his grass supply had been put into the food and turned everyone into crazy with the munchies and everything else.
Now, I remember this, and they did leave in the bit where the cook says it's grass. And I remember laughing because I thought they meant grass, like from the lawn. And I was like, oh, that's funny. He's put some grass in it. That's really funny. So I guess it was harmless enough, because I just took it literally on face value that he somehow put grass from the garden in their dinner. But yeah, I get, it was, you see it from a whole different perspective when you watch it as an adult.
Yeah, when he runs around screaming, "You stole half my stash."
Yeah.
And his sort of compadre, Skip, working as a store detective, sort of in a very sort of strange way. And this is sort of indicative of his character throughout the film, where he approaches a woman that he says he recognises from acting, but he mentions that he's a playwright and being very nice, accusing her of theft, yet managing to get sacked from the job just by claiming she had nothing on underneath her overcoat.
Yeah, he was a quite an oddball character in this, wasn't he? And yeah, I don't think I ever picked up on that again, just how odd the character was.
Yeah, I mean, I find, I suppose it works for him. He comes across as, I wouldn't even say naive or in that sort of Forrest Gump style, but he tries to see the good in everyone. And the part where they both, because obviously Richard Pryor gets sacked at the same time for drugging his clients. And when they go to the bar later on and there's the dispute in the bar with the cabbie and the guy, and he decides these two are going hammer and tongs at each other. He's going to step in, introduce himself, talk to each other, conflict resolution. Yeah, even though the guy's got what looks like an adjustable spanner to the guy's crotch, he manages to achieve a very nice little resolution there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's not a streetwise New Yorker, is he? Because this was New York when it was like really New York, like 1980. I mean, the titles themselves, when you see New York as it was then, I mean, it's not the New York we know now. So he definitely didn't appear to be as streetwise as Richard Pryor's character was.
No, and as you say, it's glitz and glamour were missing in the titles, where you have a homeless woman finding an old sweatshirt and on seeing that it says "I love New York," blowing her nose on it, or the lady who gets her heel stuck in the vent, and then the guy trying to help her starts feeling her up. Just showing the dingy side of New York.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't painted in the best light.
No, but their sort of plan, and they get it out of the way quite early on, is Skip wants to escape the city and go to Hollywood, and they're both essentially sort of in the industry where Richard Pryor was some sort of actor and he was a playwright. So they get the most beat up van possible and make it as far as Arizona, isn't it, where it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, so they kind of find themselves in a bar, don't they? And he kind of tries to chat to, the guys that eventually end up setting him up. Which again, I didn't realise when I was a kid. I just picked up on it this time that the guys that he tries to chat to are actually the men that then go and set him up for what will become his prison sentence. So again, the naivety of him comes out, doesn't it?
It is a little bit, I suppose, stereotypical of the South, where it is one of these kind of spit and sawdust bars where the only entertainment is a punching bag.
Yeah,
they've managed to get themselves a job dressing up as woodpeckers to sing and dance and promote a local bank. So then the two characters, and they obviously leave it lingering long enough that one of the guys has a very distinctive tattoo on his hand.
Yeah.
Both in the punch bag. But when they go on a break, Skip and Harry, these two steal the costumes, the woodpecker costumes, hold up the bank and sort of make off in the van. Now, again, that innocence of Skip, seeing that there's plenty of police cars and everything by the bank, he goes back and says, "Oh, what's gone on?" And when they get held, the criminal justice process in Arizona is very swift.
Very swift. And I noticed they were drinking from Dunkin' Donuts cups. Surely they could just have proved they were in Dunkin' Donuts at that. I mean, I know there would be no film, so, but it just seems, odd that they put, which I presume was advertising for Dunkin' Donuts. But, it's like, well, obviously you could just say, "Do you remember serving me?" Or if CCTV existed then. It seems very odd that they just blindly believed, especially when one of the characters was black and quite clearly you could still see their faces.
Yeah.
And the guys that robbed it were white. I don't know. There's a few plot holes there, I think. That's only one of many towards the end.
I guess this is one of those that they, as long as it's entertaining, that's the main thing. But the two get arrested and taken to jail pending their trial. And it's probably my favourite scene in the film where they're getting led into the lockup.
They're getting bad. That's what they're getting.
Getting bad. Richard Pryor, who we don't know whether his character has been in that institution before or anything like that. But he immediately starts the swagger and, realizing that if you're going into prison, you can't be weak. You can't be that fresh meat. And Gene Wilder's efforts to keep up with him, swaying about, looking very casual in his way, just walking around saying, we're bad, we're bad.
What are you doing?
I'm getting bad. You better get bad, Jack, because you ain't bad. You're going to get fucked. You bad, they don't mess with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it proved what a brilliant comedy actor Gene Wilder was actually in this. I mean, we all know Richard Pryor, was a gifted man, but Gene Wilder really comes to the forefront in that scene. He was fantastic in it.
Again, we've already seen his innocent side, and this time trying to pass off as, a hardened veteran of the penal system. He's it gets a bit sort of silly when they're in there because they have the guy who looks like he's a bit mentally ill or perhaps chasing a fly, and it leads to Skip slapping a chap on the head who's actually he's Apollo Creed's trainer from Rocky, so immediately a nice little recognizing point there. And then trying to punch him, he punches the big guy, Big Mean, and at that point you're almost expecting a link there to some sort of Blazing Saddles style punch up where you think it'll all break out in this little cell. It's kept surprisingly low key because they're putting on the little show that kind of persuades them not to do it.
Yeah.
The big guy's sidekick is a bit of an 80s movie veteran as well. It's the wonderfully named Grandel Bush, who was the special agent in Die Hard and was also in a Bond film as well. But while this is all going on, the wheels of justice are turning. They go to court virtually straight away. They're still in the same clothes, and sentenced to 125 years. Strong
justice system in America.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, without going into this is no legal podcast, believe me, but we don't see what evidence is produced, but it all seems from, and bear in mind, we already know what the true story is that they're wrongly convicted. They've gone purely on the fact that it's two people dressed in their clothes driving off in their van. There's no seemingly evidence, and their court-appointed lawyer is, I think, saying he's inept is putting it mildly.
Yeah, just a bit, yeah.
So they get sentenced to 125 years, and needless to say, are somewhat taken aback by that. And that's when they get taken to the prison, where after being led in on chains, and Harry's propositioned by the character we later meet as Rory. And it's some of the behaviour while they're getting led to their cell. You think, despite the harsh court system, the prison guards are surprisingly lax. I think when Skip starts dancing around.
Yeah, I mean, they have literally one breakdown after the other, don't they? One has a breakdown and then the other has a breakdown immediately afterwards.
You'd assume that the guards are battened up and everything else. I think they'd last about 3 seconds in real life.
I think so, especially when he started to spit at one point as well. So I'm not sure he would have got away with that.
It's quite I suppose it's quite a standard prison scene where new guys are getting led in, and you hear people shouting sort of fresh meat, and as they start getting used to their surroundings, the next scene is in the mess hall where they're eating their lunch. It's just where we met with Grossberger.
What a character!
Who's everyone's petrified of. He'd murdered his family, and no one would go anywhere near him. And again, Skip tries to, I think he's intimating that all he needs is someone to talk to. Yeah. This intimidating mountain of a guy who, funny enough, had already discussed he was in The Running Man as one of the stalkers. Yeah. I thought he was some sort of wrestler or something like that, but he was certainly big enough. Grossberger scares him off quite quickly, and he is very much the sort of the big daddy of the prison. But it's a strange sort of setup where they're obviously there. They've made their friends quite quickly. They're their fellow inmates. But this is the next part where the main sort of plot of the film. The warden, who's a very strange individual, and his somewhat sadistic assistant, Wilson, they call every new inmate into their office to ride on a mechanical bull.
Yes. And I used to think that was just what happened when you went to prison. I thought that was just a thing that you had to do if you went to prison. You had to ride a mechanical bull. I remember thinking, it doesn't seem that bad.
No, I've never done one before. I suppose I haven't been to prison, so I haven't had the chance.
No.
But, this is something where Skip seems to have a skill in riding this bull, and Craig Nelson, the captain who's sort of manning the controls, puts it up to maximum. And yet, now I don't know how they did this, because the way they've done it looks really good. You wouldn't look at Gene Wilder and think that he knows what he's doing on bull.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I presume they sped the film up. I don't know, but I would hope so.
So while this is going on, because the warden has seen his new inmate has got this skill, we learn that there's a competition that he has between another prison, where they compete in a local rodeo for money.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it just ends up being a private bet between them. The warden clearly realises he's struck gold, and does his best to try and convince Skip to compete in this rodeo for him. But it doesn't all go to plan, does it?
Not quite. Not quite. So Skip basically finds out from the other inmates that, it's all this big bet between the two wardens, and the prisoners don't get any benefit from this, etc., etc. So he wants to make it as hard as possible before he agrees to do it, so that he can kind of forge his own team and plan an escape from the rodeo.
Yeah, and this is all sort of set to the backdrop, because initially he says, well, why would I escape? I've got an appeal pending. Realising that pretty much everyone else in the prison has also tried appealing their sentence. And with his inept lawyer, it's lucky that it's his distant cousin who eventually comes to their aid. But the sort of schemes that they get up to, because Skip refuses, and his initial refusal, he says, is that his mother was a veterinarian, and he didn't want to be involved in the exploitation of animals, which immediately puts him on the wrong foot, because that's when the attempts to break him come in, and it's almost like comparing it to the Shawshank Redemption or something. Yeah. It's not quite the same, because the next scene we have them doing extreme manual labour, and yet Skip manages to pull it off all in denim with a little pink neckerchief.
Yeah, he suddenly gets really tough, doesn't he? And he's able to sustain quite a lot.
I suppose it's a willpower thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe we have seen this all along, that he is quite mentally strong in himself. He believes in the power of thinking, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure physically, no matter how strong he was, he could have sustained quite what they put him through.
Yeah, because even the chap passing the water bucket along, which you think is a spoon until you realise it's actually a colander.
Yeah.
Trying to drink water through one of those is difficult at the best of times. And then the next scene is him getting chained up in a cell, sort of like something out of Life of Brian or something. And in there, sort of thinking, oh, we've broken him now, it turns out that, or he claims anyway, that all they've done is heal his long-standing back injury. He's certainly resisting.
He really is. He really is. He really is.
And their ultimate punishment, well, I suppose they put him in the box next, don't they?
Yeah, he goes down to the hole
solitary.
Which I think we saw, as you said, in Shawshank. I mean, maybe Shawshank was inspired by Stir Crazy. I really like to think so, because that was
There's a couple of deleted scenes.
That was kind of Andy's punishment, wasn't it? In Shawshank, going down to the hole was like the ultimate thing you could endure. But yeah, he comes out of that and asks for more time in the hole.
Yeah, well, maybe we haven't explored the fact that Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman could have been the next Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
I would love to see that have happened.
I suppose they've both tried a little bit of comedy, but yeah, it's maybe an untapped resource.
They haven't tried a chicken suit each. That's
No.
what I would say.
Well, not in public anyway.
Well, yeah, that's where they're going wrong.
But yeah, their sort of ultimate effort and realizing that none of these plans have worked yet, they decide the best way to scare them will be, let's put Grossberger in their tight little 2-man cell. Now, I say Grossberger, we touched on, is a giant of a man.
Yeah.
As Skip is taken back to the cell, he's already sizing up Harry, who's looking petrified.
Mm-hmm.
This was a good chance for Skip to exercise his talking powers and communication and counselling, because not long after that, the three of them are quite happily playing cards together.
Yeah, they've made friends with Grossberger, which is great. And instantly we forget that he's a mass murderer that's murdered all his family, and we like him too. So
he's a big softie.
He is. He means well.
Yeah, he does. Even though he's cheating at cards, but then so's Harry.
Yeah.
It's all okay. After this is eventually they're realising, the warden and Wilson, that this isn't working. So their second ultimate plan, they end up taking Harry off to the hospital, scaring him with his chap in the next bed who's had a testicle removed, and the guy they're force feeding and everything else. Eventually, they do come round, because Skip goes into the warden and sort of agrees as long as certain conditions are met. But yeah, it's all very, Skip's sort of quiet confidence seems to be coming out a lot more now, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's very much in control of the warden at this stage, isn't he?
And at this point, while he's there sort of negotiating for benefits, so he gets a nice cell and everything else, it all seems like the prison's being run for his benefit.
Yeah.
It's the other sort of his team that he insists on are now starting to make sort of tools, and a little montage in the metal workshop where they're making what they'll need to escape, because they've already identified that the better he does at the rodeo, the more chance they'll have of escape. But yeah, not many prisons, you think, have a farm attached to them. And maybe it's an Arizona thing, I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. It's not something I've studied, to be honest. But yeah, I don't think they do. No. This might be a one-off, yeah.
It's a nice sort of little practice arena for them to go off and do their bits with the horses and the bulls. And it's where Harry and Rory, the chap we met earlier on, they decide that their role in the team is to be the rodeo clown. It mostly consists of Harry getting chased by a giant bull when he realises the magic word is shit.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. They do make good clowns, though.
They really did.
I suppose of all the people you'd want as a clown, it would be Richard Pryor.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate clown, surely.
So we come to the rodeo, and this is where the big bet is going to come to fruition, and it sort of reminds me of that Simpsons episode with the softball game, where they bet is $1 million that they'll bet on a softball game, and it shows I suppose the difference between the great and the good, and so on. I've never been to rodeo. I certainly don't watch it on telly. I think my main sort of interaction with it was the bit in Borat where he went and sang the national anthem badly.
I think that might be my only reference other than Stir Crazy as well.
Now, I'm led to believe, anyway, from my frantic Googling, that the main point of rodeo is to stay on the animal as long as possible. I suppose that's why he was selected from the mechanical bull. But it's very popular. The locals seem to be really invested in it.
Yeah, they seem to be loving it, don't they? It seems to be a massive event. I mean, they got people selling popcorn. They got all sorts going on there.
A spectator sport, seeing people bucking around on bulls. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well.
They should introduce that over here, maybe.
I don't know if it'd work over here. We're very nonplussed, aren't we? The English. I don't think, or the British. We wouldn't be impressed by it.
No,
It takes a lot to impress the British.
I suppose we're still impressed by one man and his dog. It's
true.
Animal sports of a very different kind.
Yeah, a bit more twee for us.
But again, there's some mild peril where Harry gets on the big bull and one of the prison inmates sticks a padlock on, in a bid to kind of freak the bull out and everything else. And Grossberger, who's of course made it onto the team, has comes along and saves the day. All the while this is going on, and this is something that confused me, was now we've obviously seen the others making tools and bits and bobs. I wonder how they knew the layout of this arena, stadium, whatever you play rodeo in, because it seems very convoluted. They use little wrenches to get the nuts and bolts off some of the bleachers, and yet they seem to emerge in this labyrinth of underground tunnels and everything else. I didn't pick up, was this something they've tried to do before?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know whether, because obviously I don't know his name, but the Mexican guy that was part of the gang, he had his family helping. So I don't know if they staked, like, case the joint beforehand. Yeah. And, because they were presumably employed by the stadium or the arena to help out with the catering or whatever they were doing there. So it wasn't really clear how they knew all this stuff.
Again, like you say, plot holes and this, that, and the other, and at least it provides that bit of peril, doesn't it? But
yeah,
it is very strange again how this all worked. But while and it's the ultimate distraction of Skip playing or doing the rodeo, where the better he does, and they touched upon, it gives them all, they're sneaking through, it's all very Great Escape style, rolling under these panels, into the waiting popcorn cart and everything else. And yet Harry and Rory come back in, Harry dressed in very fancy get up, and Rory dressed as a woman, which I suppose back in the early 80s was just a funny gadget, really.
Yeah, it was the 80s. Come on. What's funnier than that in an 80s film? You got to have someone in drag, surely.
Yeah, in full makeup as well.
He did it quite well, to be fair.
Yeah. So I tried to do that at a weekend, but moving on. It's strange that none, in a lot of these prison escape stories, there is that chase thing, or when they realise, and again, I'm not saying that this is any way related to Shawshank Redemption, but of course there's the scene where they realise that Andy Dufresne has escaped and everything else. Mm-hmm. They escape relatively scot-free, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. You don't see any, alarms going off or anything really happening, do you? They just escape.
It's one of those, again, where they've made it out, I suppose, undetected, and while the other prison sort of rodeo guy, he wins the tiebreaker, so where he and Skip have to take the bag of money from the bull's head.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, it's, again, a sort of probably quite a normal thing, I don't know. So Skip basically allows him to win on the proviso that he throws the money into the prisoners because they wouldn't have got it anyway. So I suppose that's the distraction they need, because they escape in a little sort of camper van, mm-hmm. and conveniently bump into the lawyer and the cousin, because the cousin, as we talked about or touched on earlier, she gets a job at a strip club, fully clothed, which
he's the only one with clothes on in it, which is not suspicious.
No, and while she's working in there, she actually sees the guys who robbed the bank because she makes out the tattoo.
That's right.
So while she's worked this out, now, again, the wheels of justice moving quickly, does that mean that the sentences or the convictions of Harry and Skip have been quashed? I didn't see an appeals trial. I didn't see any sort of high court scenario here. They just basically went, we're free, and off they go.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that they're free of bank robbery, but that they will be charged with breaking out of prison and aiding and abetting murderers to also escape. Because we know at least one of them was a murderer. I don't think we know what the Mexican guy was in there for, but we know that Harry's friend was in there for killing his stepdad. So I think they'd probably get in quite a bit of trouble for that.
Yeah, and I mean, as you say, ultimately, whether they did that or not, they still broke out of prison. They still, I mean, I suppose there wouldn't be any issues around fraud or whatever. But yeah, it's very. Maybe that was the sequel that was never made. I know we've got some mutual friends who do podcasts about sequels that were never made, and maybe we could suggest Crazy 2, where they ultimately thought they were free and were recaptured and sentenced to another 20 years.
Absolutely. If Beyond the Box Set are listening,
Yeah, hello,
get onto it. Yeah, we want the Stir Crazy 2, please. So in my mind, I think they would have had to have tried to break back into prison. And that kind of would have made quite a funny sequel, that they had to break back in to be released again.
I think that was the plot of Prison Break, wasn't it?
There you go. They could have inspired that as well as Shawshank.
Well, I say Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, get them back. They'll do Stir Crazy 2. I think we've hit the jackpot there.
Brilliant.
I mean, as a film, we didn't even talk about it. It's a film directed by Sidney Poitier, which isn't someone that you'd instantly twig would be in charge of what was one of the most popular films of the year, and certainly a massive popular comedy. Apparently it was the first film that he directed that he didn't actually star in, and it was also the first film by an African-American director that made over $100 million. So,
really?
Yeah. So really, this film did an awful lot. It's difficult because certainly in my eyes, I always see No Evil, Hear No Evil as perhaps my favourite film with Wilder and Pryor in. And yet this was probably the most successful.
Yeah, I guess it was. I don't know. I mean, I did like See No Evil, Hear No Evil, but I think this probably would have been my favourite one, just because, like I said, for some reason, I had it on video with, when you used to have like two films, one after the other on videotape, and I had this with War Games, which was funny because the Warden was also in War Games.
Yeah.
So I used to see him as the Warden and then just loop over to War Games, and he was in War Games as well. So purely coincidental. But yeah, I really used to love this film a lot as a kid.
That's a weird combination of those two films.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess my dad just put them on the same tape. They were probably just on telly at a similar time. Right. He taped one after the other.
I thought you meant they were on one of the pre-recorded things.
Oh no! These were taped off the telly when you tried to edit the adverts out yourself and missed half of it, and that was off the telly.
It's funny, like sort of talking about those old videos. On part of going back and watching them was the fun bit when helping my mum clear her house out, and we had some old VHS tapes recorded of there was definitely one of Star Wars, and we must have recorded it off the telly in 86, 87, and it still had all the adverts for all these shops that no longer exist, and it sounds sacrilege to say it, but they were as entertaining as the film.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Sometimes I just watch like 80s ads on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because they're really funny.
And it was, even ones you remember, like the water in Mallorca, that one. And
oh, yeah.
It was just great. And this was maybe a film that it kind of, I suppose, passed me by at that age anyway, because, again, my dad just didn't put it in front of me. I suppose he was too busy looking at Predator and trying to get me into John Wayne and Clint Eastwood films. But I say, coming back to watch it again after a fair gap, just realise how funny it was and how great Wilder and Pryor were.
Yeah, they were great. They weren't a double act, but they certainly worked well as a double act.
Yeah. And those films, the four that they did together, brilliant. But then you think about the work they did separately, and I suppose I've hamstrung myself with this 80s thing where, there are films by them that I'd love to do, like, again, like Blazing Saddles or Willy Wonka or things like that with Gene Wilder. And, he certainly carried the Willy Wonka film all on his own.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I mean, it was a really interesting choice, because I know we, talking about which film to talk about, we sort of went all over the shop, really. And to land on this one was nice, because it's different and yet a funny one that we probably, whether we've done it justice or not, I don't know. But it was great to watch and great to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of film that everyone likes, but maybe they've forgotten that they like. And you know what I mean? You need to revisit it. It's the kind of film, when you mention it to them, like, oh yeah, that was really, really good. But they might not have watched it for a few years. So,
well, hopefully this will bump a few people into giving it a watch and remembering it as fondly as we did anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Carla, a couple of things talked about before about what we'd like to promote. So your podcast, Theme Park Films, of course, the premise of it's quite straightforward. It's any film that's got some sort of theme park link to it. What can we expect in the future from you?
Yeah, so basically, well, like you said, it's basically the only rule we have is that any film we review has to have featured in a theme park. So they basically have to have a ride or attraction. There's no particular reason for that other than we needed some kind of theme to keep us on track. So we just thought, why not go round Universal Studios and Walt Disney World and do all of their films? So that's kind of why it's that. It's very light-hearted. I'm often annoyed it's in the film section, really, of iTunes, because technically it probably should be in the comedy version. Not because I'm particularly funny, but my co-host is very, very funny. And yeah, it is just, we've been called the Gogglebox of podcasts because we give no facts whatsoever about the film. Half the time we don't even learn the characters' names. It's just two normal people discussing a film that they've just watched, and that's it. That's the whole premise of it. So I probably haven't sold it, but give it a go. It can't hurt, can it? It's free.
I mean, I haven't been to many theme parks in my days, but one I did go to was Fort Park, and it was the Saw one. Mm-hmm. Is that one that you've done?
We are only doing the American ones at the moment, but I mean, when we eventually run out, and then I guess we might have to go to Fort Park and the ones in Britain perhaps, but yeah, we'll try and wring out as much as we can from the American ones. That's for sure.
Oh, superb! And as you say, you're on iTunes as Theme Park Films.
Yeah, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Theme Park Films podcast, and on any podcast player. We're pretty much on all of them now.
All the good ones and some bad as well.
That's it. Everywhere.
And the other thing that I was keen to talk about was, and it was kind of how we were introduced or how we met, was through the Britpod scene, which is, well, you're best describing it, but it's certainly a collection of British podcasts that I know you and some of the other guys do a lot of work behind the scenes to promote. Sort of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I first started doing the podcasting, which was, just over a year ago now, I saw quite a lot of people kind of hashtagging, and I won't say the hashtags, but several hashtags promoting each other. So they were like little units that just used to retweet each other. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was someone, because they all tended to be the big American shows, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was someone in Britain doing that? And I just sat there and I thought, well, I could do that. I could maybe, get a gang of sort of 4 or 5 people. That was all I thought initially. And I already listened to Rough Giraffe podcast, so I got in touch with Stacey. And then I just randomly searched British podcast and came across That King Thing with Tom and Is Not Radio with Daniel. And kind of within an afternoon, we were all chatting on Twitter DM, and we'd formed Britpod scene together. And yeah, at the start, we were just retweeting each other, really. And then we asked other people to join, and we were all on a Twitter DM. It got too big, so we moved over to another platform. And now we've got like 100 different British podcasts as part of Britpod scene. And it's way beyond retweeting now. We just we've got our own category on Podbean. So if you go to Podbean and search Britpod Scene, you will find all of the British podcasts that are hosted by Podbean. It's not all of Britpod Scene podcasts, but it's the ones that are hosted by Podbean. So definitely go and check that out. And our Twitter account only retweets the shows from Britpod Scene. So if you go up to @Britpod Scene, everything we retweet are from the shows that we endorse. And I must just point out actually that Stacey is the recruiter for Britpod Scene. We all divvied up jobs and blah blah blah. And she does listen and vet every single person that comes in. So, when I say there's over 100 members, there could quite easily be 300 members. It's just that you have to get past Stacey first. So, they are selected. You have been selected as what we consider to be, good enough, because we're really proud of what we've created and we want, good people in it. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have perfect sound or, be professional, but, we're not just inviting anyone to join. This is really people that we feel strongly we want to promote.
Well, the thing is that, there's so many podcasts now, and it's easy if someone is keen enough to just, they can record a podcast on a phone and trying to get that word out, and trying to, some people do it because it's therapeutic. Some people do it because they just, they think they want to change the world, and everything in between, and having that support and having that network and group there to get beyond just promoting, but giving advice. In our case tonight, it's actually talking to each other. There's a lot I know that goes on behind the scenes of people guesting on each other's podcasts, and even some of the stuff that is alien to me. I mean, I'm very much a layman, and some of the conversation I've seen about the technical stuff, there's some really knowledgeable guys there. Totally, valuable resource to anyone who's obviously, once they get past Stacey, which is the challenge, but having that there is a huge boost. And I know that the work you did around Podbean, getting on the front page, was huge.
Yeah, it took me a little bit of time, but we got there in the end. And it just proves that anyone can do it, really. If you listen to some of our earlier episodes, the sound is off and we didn't particularly know what we were doing, but we had the passion to do it, and practice makes perfect. And when I say you have to get past Stacey, it just needs to be good. It just needs to be something that we think that someone else would enjoy. It doesn't have to be perfect. The only rules we have are, no religion, no politics, because that's an icky area to get into. But anything else, get in touch, and I'll send Stacey to listen to you.
Yeah, she'll be there listening, waiting.
She will. You have no idea how many she listens to. I mean, I get bogged down because I make it. The minute someone joins, I always listen to their show because it's the right thing to do. I created it. But that really takes up a lot of my time. So how Stacey does it when she listens to, probably 3 to my 1, I just don't know how she finds the time. And she's got a really sensible job and I don't. So yeah, hats off to her.
Well, so it's for me anyway. I'm into the teens of episodes, and learning about that sort of stuff kind of on the job. I mean, there's hopefully a noticeable difference in quality from the first episodes to now. Anyway, certainly in technical quality, if not me, but it's just been incredible, and having that available has just been magnificent. And I know a lot of people listen to this and talk about doing their own podcast or setting one up, and there really isn't anywhere better, certainly in this country, for that support and that network and everything else.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. I'm glad that, I'm glad we are helping people. I get help every day. I mean, the other admins must be sick of me asking them for help all the time. So, yeah, I'm really, really pleased that we can help people.
Carla, it's been great to talk about the film and also the various good jobs that you do. I'm going to play out, as usual, with what song was number one in the charts at the time of this film's release over here, which was Jealous Guy by Roxy Music. Thank you very much for coming along and talking, and hopefully you'll come back soon to talk about another film.
Absolutely, I've loved it. Thank you very, very much for having me.
This podcast is part of Britpod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritpodScene.com or Britpod Scene on Twitter to find out more.